We're going to go ahead and give it one more minute as folks are still joining us. So we'll begin at 11:01. Alrighty, so it is 11:01, so we're going to go ahead and get started. If folks still continue to join, I will go ahead and let them in. But hello, everybody. I am Courtney Leffler, and I am from Headwaters RC&D here in Butte Silver Bow, and I am your room host for this breakout session. This breakout session is keeping HUD dollars local to benefit lower income residents and businesses. So we are extremely excited to have you guys here today and to have you guys join us. I have went ahead and muted your line, but if for some reason you are not muted, please go ahead and mute your line. And let's use the chat function for questions. We're going to try to address all the questions before the session ends. Just a few housekeeping items before we go ahead and get started. All of these sessions are going to be recorded. Please mute your lines and turn off your video while the presenters are presenting. That'll help with internet connection and make sure we have a stable connection as we're going through the session. And let's use the chat icon to select all the panelist attendees. And if all of you guys can go ahead and use that chat function and put your name, your organization, and where you're located. And then that'll give our panelists an idea of where their audience is located. So if you guys can go ahead and use that chat function, it's just at the bottom. And if you don't mind, just putting your name, your organization, and where you're located. And when we do question and answer, you guys are more than welcome to turn your video back on. If for some reason you're not comfortable having your video on, that's perfectly fine too. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over to our presenters today. So we have Jackie and we have Jeff Hickox and Jennifer Olson. And I think Jennifer is going to kick us off today with the presentation. So thank you guys so much for being here. If you guys have technical assistant problems at all, put it in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat. And I know Jeff and Jennifer are also going to be monitoring the chat as they go through the presentation if there is some questions that you guys have while they're going through it. So thank you guys so much for being here. We're excited to be here today and have this presentation. So I'm going to hand it over to Jennifer.
Thanks, Courtney, and welcome everyone. We're really excited to be here at the Montana Housing Partnership Conference. And I would like to quickly give the floor over to our Deputy Regional Administrator, Eric Amundsen, to share a welcome to all of you from HUD's Region 8.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. I sure appreciate it. I'm honored to be here and to just say a few opening remarks. And I want to say hello to my Montana friends as well. I recognize a lot of the names. I was fortunate to be able to spend most of the 20 teens in Helena, Montana, working for HUD before coming to Denver. And so I'm in Denver now, but know that Montana is still in my heart, and look forward to connecting with a lot of the group later on. But I wanted to talk to you about this topic just kind of on a regional and a national perspective as well. This is a really important training, and thank you to Jennifer Olson and Jeff Hickox for coordinating. They're excellent trainers, and you'll find that out during the course of the training. And also I wanted to just give a shout out to Jackie Gerard, our state director in Helena as well. But as we think about this program, it's really been an important priority of HUD over the years. And a big part of that is promoting economic self-sufficiency. That's really at the heart of a lot of our programs. And so Section 3 is just so key to that. And you'll learn a lot more about that today, just the opportunities that are available and how you can find out more. And what's really encouraging is that as we look at the HUD priorities under our new administration, under Secretary Marcia Fudge, one of the things she really wants to focus on is the implementation of HUD programs in rural areas across the country. And so I know that Montana is on her radar. I know that our HUD region in the Rocky Mountain West is definitely on her radar. She's really interested in learning about how the programs work here and how we can strengthen and improve our programs and delivery. And so Section 3 is such a big part of that. And it just provides so many opportunities to a wide range of people. And so we see support for this regardless of which political administration is in power. I know that it goes back and forth, but the trend, the theme is that Section 3 is important. And a big part of that is, like I said, providing opportunities to residents that they wouldn't otherwise have. And you'll find out more details on that today. And the neat thing is that Jennifer and Jeff have more trainings planned throughout the course of the summer. And so we're really focused on targeting, on promoting Section 3 and how it can really just bolster economic growth in Montana and throughout our region. So I'm encouraged to hear the presentation, and I'm actually attending a meeting with the Secretary later today on a listening session in rural areas. And so it's just so refreshing to have an interest in this part of the country and Montana specifically, and how our programs really are implemented on the ground. And so with that, thank you again, Jennifer, and I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Eric, and thank you for taking the time to join us here in Montana. We consider you a Montanan, even though you're currently residing in Colorado. So thanks for joining us. And also on the line today, our virtual meeting, is the Montana State Director, Jackie Gerard. She and I work here in the Helena office to help FPM across all of Montana and all of the communities. And also with me today, and who will be helping me present, is Jeff Hickox. He's one of the HUD analysts out of Colorado, but he and I have been taking the lead on Section 3 for the region. And then, of course, myself, many of you may know me as a Department of Commerce employee with the Community Development Division, but I'm a former state employee and happy to have joined the HUD team here in Region 8. So my colleagues and I will be happy to answer any questions as we begin to walk through Section 3. And as Eric pointed out, Section 3 is just a really cool part of the law that helps to promote economic opportunities really at the local level, and really engage in a kind of a double impact, if you will, where HUD dollars are being invested to develop or rehabilitate housing projects or facilities, and also provide economic opportunities through contracting or employment to businesses or workers. So let's jump right in. So I think the benefit that we have here is Section 3 has provided such a great opportunity for us to talk a little bit more about the training and opportunities that Section 3 can provide. And today, like I said, my colleague Jeff and I would like to share with you some basic and high level Section 3 information. So we're going to provide a bit of history of this regulation. We're going to share what it does, why it's important, who it impacts, how to understand the different parts of the rule, and how briefly we're going to talk about how it's applied. And so while this is a basic overview, it is important to note that the rule has different application and guidance for different HUD recipients. We'll be going through those slides and are happy to take your questions at the end. And we also have a few stopping points so we can kind of talk a little bit about some of the questions that might come up throughout the presentation. But if you can, like Courtney said, put them in the chat and we'll be going through them. So for those of you who are like me and like a deeper dive in the new rule, I'm excited to also share with you at the end of the presentation an invitation to some June trainings that will provide more in-depth look at Section 3 that's geared towards more specific groups or specific HUD recipients. We'll discuss this again in greater detail at the end of the presentation, but just in case you're unable to stick around through the whole presentation, Jeff's going to start sharing some things in the chat. And so we'll do that soon enough to send the invite out so you can begin to plan for joining us in the June meeting. So we want to start our presentation and share a little bit about Section 3 through a couple of online quizzes. We're using the platform outside of Wahoo, so we're not as savvy to use Wahoo, but we do have a Office 365 polling to engage you in the presentation and test your knowledge a little bit, or maybe I should say maybe test our presentation prowess on Section 3. But no worries, even if you don't get all of the answers correct, Jeff and I are here to help guide you through. So in order for you to participate through These surveys or polls, you'll need to get your cell phone, or you can click on it with your QR code that's on the screen in front of you. Or Jeff will also be posting in the chat a link to the surveys as well. So you can definitely use either forum to help engage with our presentation today. As you get your phones out though and get connected to the QR code, Jeff and I would like to give you a little background on who we are and what part of our HUD we have the privilege to work in. So a few following slides will have the same QR code on it for you to connect if you're choosing to use the QR code, or to just get connected through the link that Jeff is sharing. So here's your QR code. Sorry. So go ahead and take it away, Jeff.
Excellent. Thanks, Jen. And good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be joining you. Jeff Hickox, again, out of our Denver regional office. And excited to kick us off with some of that kind of introductory content while you're moving through that first quiz and getting familiar with that process. So at HUD Region 8, we're one of 10 regions across the country that carry out HUD's mission, which is to create strong, sustainable communities and quality affordable homes for all. We're working to strengthen the housing market to bolster the economy and protect consumers, meet the need for quality affordable rental homes, utilize housing as a platform for improving quality of life, build inclusive and sustainable communities free from discrimination, and through all of that, also transforming the way HUD does business. At Region 8, we do this well because of a great team of professionals internal to our agency, the effective programs that carry out this mission, and really most importantly, because of great community partners and recipients that we have across the region, such as yourselves who are with us today. Next slide, please. So there are several offices of HUD that carry out this mission. You may be most familiar with some of our colleagues in community planning and development, the Office of Public and Indian Housing, perhaps Fair Housing Equal Opportunity. These make up only some of the offices that supports HUD's mission. Jennifer and I serve in the Office of Field Policy and Management, or you may hear us say FPM. FPM is the part of HUD that serves oftentimes as the first point of contact for community members, and we're located in each state's field office, such as the one that we have in Helena. FPM also communicates the Secretary's priorities and initiatives, which is what led to our discussion here today about Section 3. Ultimately, we strive to meet the needs of our customers and make a positive difference in their lives. Our next slide, please. So hopefully that gave you all a chance to scan the QR code, click the link, and complete the first two questions. And Jen's going to be toggling between screens right now so we can pull up the results real time. But you may be curious, why are we curious about which organizations are in the room? And part of that is important for us to know because the Section 3 rule applies a little bit differently and has specific guidance for different recipient types. For instance, the rules compliance is a little different for a larger PHA over 250 units versus a smaller PHA. So that's something we'll dive into a little bit later on. But for now, let's see who we have in the room and how folks are feeling about Section 3. Jen, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks for everybody who's taking the polling. And I apologize, I have two screens so I can see the polling, so I might be looking away. But it looks like at this point, hopefully you can all see we have 13 responses. Thanks for those that are participating, and primarily have a large number of nonprofit organizations, 5 of them on our presentation today, which is great. You typically are the subrecipients that are working with the HUD funds that come through a local government or others. And then we also have today several a couple of state or federal government attendees as well. And then we also have 3 local government attendees, which is fabulous. Even if you don't receive HUD funds directly, or if you do receive HUD funds directly, the Section 3 rule will definitely apply, particularly as it relates to the work that you're doing to create or rehabilitate affordable housing. And then lastly, we have some for-profit organizations, which are typically our partners that help to construct affordable housing that that kind of ranks up the three-party partnership of where the HUD funds come from to a local government, a nonprofit, and a for-profit organization. So thank you all for joining us today. Second question was, how confident are you in your understanding of the Section 3 rule? And it looks like we have 5 folks, about 38%, that are saying they're somewhat confident, which is fabulous. We learn from learners. And so if there's anything that you have that you'd like to share at the end of the presentation to help give words of wisdom to other participants, even if you're feeling somewhat confident, feel free to share that. We also have a couple of folks that are somewhat not confident. That's okay. Hopefully the presentation builds that confidence for you and increases your knowledge of Section 3. And then we have about 38%, 5 folks that are extremely not confident. Don't worry, Jeff and I have specific email addresses for you, and we can help you build that so that you're definitely feeling confident. Well, thanks everyone for taking the survey, and I really feel like it's going to be a really good start to a good conversation. All right, well, let's get us back on track. Hold on, just going to take me just a second. Sorry. So let's build our knowledge and understanding of what is Section 3. So Section 3 is a part of the Housing and Urban Development Act of 1968. It was amended by the Housing Community Development Act of 1992. It helps to foster local economic development, neighborhood economic improvement, and individual self-sufficiency, which is going to be a really important part of understanding the Section 3 rule. It requires that recipients of certain HUD financial assistance, to the greatest extent feasible, provide job training and contracting opportunities for low or very low income residents in connection with projects and activities in their neighborhoods. So what does that mean? Well, when it's applied to the recipients of HUD funds, it means that when certain HUD funds are expended on a project, low and very low income persons can benefit from the employment opportunities that the project creates, and also the benefits that come from the completed project. For example, a low-income person could be employed as a laborer on a HUD-funded affordable housing construction project. And when the housing project is complete, they can live in the newly constructed affordable housing unit at the site that they were just employed at to help build. So the Section 3 rule works to encourage the employment and economic opportunities for the people that would also benefit by living in the project. So where did Section 3 come from?
All right. So it's important to know that the Section 3 rule has been around for quite some time. And this rule really demonstrates HUD's continued commitment to economic self-sufficiency and our long-term intention of continued improvements to this rule to make it more effective to benefit the people that benefit in the low or very low income communities. As you can see, this rule was established through the Housing and Urban Development Act of 1968, and over time, the application of the rule has really expanded. In 1992, it was amended as part of the Housing and Community Development Act, and in 1995, FHEO published an interim rule. While this interim rule was never really finalized, the procedures have been used ever since, at least until the most recent rule change began in 2019. This new rule was published this past year in September of 2020 and became effective this past November of 2020. And compliance on these new regulations begins this coming July 1st of 2021, so in about 6 weeks. It's important to understand that when the new rule became effective in November, it provided a period of time for recipients to prepare for the compliance period. This interim period of time between November and this coming June 30th of 2021 is for recipients to prepare to implement this new Section 3 rule. All applicable programs will be expected to begin reporting on projects that are assisted or funded on or after July 1st, 2021. So we're excited to have you all here today to learn more about that. Next slide, please. As you saw with the timeline, there have been a number of recent changes to Section 3. This new rule is working to improve the effectiveness of Section 3 in 4 ways. First, by aligning reporting with standard business practices, promoting sustained employment and career development, changing the threshold for Section 3 covered assistance, and focusing on key reporting outcome metrics. We'll discuss the new rule in a bit to better explore some of these changes. One other thing for you to be aware of, and a significant change with this new rule, is who will be monitoring for compliance of this new rule. Previously, this responsibility resided with our FHEO office. Moving forward, it'll be with the individual programs. So with community planning and development, depending on what grant you're receiving. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but first let's discuss why Section 3 is important. And really personally, I think Section 3 is most important because of the intention behind it. As you heard from Eric, as you heard from Jen, the intention behind it is to provide economic opportunities to a person who is low or very low income, who is living in or could be living in public or subsidized housing, or is a resident of other public housing projects, or finally is a youth build participant. The target of Section 3 is any person whose income is under 80% of the area median income, but the prioritization is for people who reside in public or subsidized housing. This is why Section 3 is important, because Section 3 provides economic opportunities, training opportunities, and contract opportunities to those individuals that are qualified Section 3 workers and Section 3 business concerns. In essence, it leverages HUD funding that is going into a project, so it's also providing jobs and contracting opportunities to workers in your community. Finally, Section 3 is important, frankly, also because it's the law. And you'll see that as we begin to explore all of the programs that it applies to. Next slide. All right, so Section 3 applies to many HUD programs, and in turn, those programs, as we said, are responsible for ensuring compliance with Section 3 when the rule is triggered. You've got a list on the screen in front of you. It's important to know that Section 3 applies to HUD-funded public and Indian housing assistance for development, operating, and modernization expenditures. Also, Section 3 applies to HUD-funded housing and community development projects that create housing rehabilitation, housing construction, or other public construction. This includes CDBG, as well as many other HUD-funded programs. Again, you've got that comprehensive list in front of you. Next slide, please. All right, so hopefully that was some helpful information to get us started and to see where Section 3 may apply to you or your organization. If you're a for-profit business, I know you might be curious, oh, what does this mean for us? And we'll be talking about that a little bit more as well. But in the meantime, we've got another quiz for you, a little knowledge check here. So again, we've got the QR code on the screen, and I'm also going to go ahead and paste in the direct link, if that's easier for you to click that link. And go ahead and open that up. Take just a couple, we'll give you about 10 seconds to respond to that, 10 to 15 seconds, and then we'll review those responses. And I'm curious how many folks use the QR code versus the link. Personally, it's something that I'm still trying to get familiar with. I recently learned for folks, previously you had to use a QR code app, but I learned, at least on iPhones, that you can just use your normal camera, and when you hold it up to it, it'll sense that it's a QR code, and it'll offer a little pop-up of, do you want to open the link to the QR code, and it'll take you right there just in your normal camera app. But Jen, it looks like you've got the responses all up. I'll hand it off to you.
Yeah, it looks like we have 8 responses. So the quiz question was, has the rule changed? Oh, some more come in. That's great. And the majority of folks said yes, which is great. Means our mics are working. Also, why is the Section 3 rule important? So a bit of a trick question. Is it because it's the law? It leverages HUD funds. It provides contract opportunities. It provides employment opportunities. It provides training opportunities. Well, if you answered it's all of the above, you're correct, because it does do all of those things. And we think it does it efficiently with the new rule change. And then we also had a surprise question. Eric gave you the answer to this early on, but who is the current HUD secretary? And everybody got that right, Marcia Fudge. So thanks all for participating. I'm going to get us back to our presentation screen. All right. Well, to better understand and adequately comply with the Section 3 regulation, it's important to understand the three primary parts of the new Section 3 rule. The new rule is comprised of 3 Federal Register notices that describe how the rule has changed, and we'll briefly go over those listed here. Most importantly, though, Section 3 has been codified in 24 C.F.R. Part 75 and has moved away from 24 C.F.R. Part 135, unless any funding has been obligated before the enactment and compliance dates of the new rule. So again, that important CFR is 24 CFR Part 75, which I'll say a few times more, and Jeff will talk about as well, so that we can make sure you're looking at the right part of the new rule. So we'll talk a little bit about these 3 Federal Register notices that are listed here to help guide you through your understanding in Section 3. So first, the delegation of authority Federal Register notice changed the office in which HUD was responsible for Section 3. So previously, as Jeff discussed, the Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity staff monitored and provided technical assistance for Section 3. The new rule changed that and now places field policy and management at the forefront of Section 3 outreach and technical assistance support for recipients and grantees to help them meet the benchmarks established by the new rule. That's why you're hearing from Jeff and I today. Monitoring for the compliance now falls to the program offices which provided the financial support. So Public and Indian Housing will monitor public housing authorities for compliance. Community Planning and Development will monitor for compliance for block grant recipients, and so on. So which program office will have monitoring responsibility will be determined by the level of funding awarded to the project. In general, the program that provides the most significant investment will be responsible for monitoring. Let's take a little more close look at the new rule. The impetus of the new Section 3 rule in the Federal Register notice that was published in September 2020, and again became effective November 2020, was to improve the effectiveness of the regulations, simplify and streamline the requirements, and effectively benefit recipients to achieve the purpose of the statute and promote economic opportunities for Section 3 workers and Section 3 business concerns. So let's discuss a little more about these changes. The rule is divided into 4 subparts. Since this presentation is intended for all audience, we'll be going over the rule generally, but it is important to find your application in the new rule under the different subparts. So due to the manner in which the new rule is broken up and how it applies to different programs in HUD, I'll be hosting training webinars, trainings that you can join in June to dive deeper into the new rule for those specific entities, such as one for large PHAs, a separate one for small PHAs, and another one for housing and community development recipients. But for today, let's look at the new rule where the changes impact all programs, with just an important caveat that we'll go through. The new rule has redefined a Section 3 resident as a Section 3 worker, and further redefined what a Section 3 worker is. As you can see here, the definition of the Section 3 worker can be met in 3 ways. Therefore, the Section 3 worker who meets any one of these 3 definitions can be qualified to meet the definition. Additionally, the worker can self-certify their Section 3 status in the Opportunity Portal, which we'll discuss a bit later. It's important to note that low income is 80% of area median income and very low income is 50% of area median income when we're talking about low or very low income individuals. And of course, HUD posts the annual HUD income limits on the website huduser.gov. So I encourage you to make that a favorite and take a look at that website for more information about what your specific community's area median income is for a low or very low income worker. Another key change is that the new rule also redefined what a Section 3 business is. There are 3 ways in which a Section 3 business can qualify to meet the Section 3 definition. Businesses can self-certify in the Section 3 Business Registry, which we will review also in just a minute. But it's important to note that while businesses can self-certify, they still must provide documentation of their qualification to the recipient at the time they're contracted. Additionally, all businesses must recertify every 3 years from their certification. This slide and the next gives some greater details on many more changes that were made in the Section 3 rule. To keep this high level, I'm not going to review these slides with you, but rather wanted to give them to you as a reference so that you can jot them down or refer to them later. But I do want to point out one important change, which are the thresholds listed here. Specifically, Section 3 applies to HCD projects costing more than $200,000, where in comparison, a public housing authority, it's just simply $1 HUD invested, and the Section 3 rule would apply. Additionally, there's a target approach for those individuals that live in the area nearest a project site called a targeted Section 3 worker. Again, join me in June for a little more detailed discussion about those changes, or you can definitely reach out to us individually. There's some contact information at the end. And so this next slide, the second one, also provides additional key changes. It's important to note one key change here listed is the benchmarks. This is a specific change that requires HUD-funded recipients to demonstrate quantitative measures to meet the requirements in the new rule. So when applying the Section 3 rule, the benchmarks for large PHAs or those over 250 units and housing and community development grantees is quantitative, while small PHAs or those under 250 must demonstrate qualitative measures. As this is an important rule change, we're going to take a little bit more deeper look at the benchmarks so that you have an idea of what that means to apply to a project. The new rule establishes separate sections between public housing and authorities and housing and community development funding. As you can see here, this slide discusses the housing and community development benchmarks. This is important to note as there are different thresholds for different types of funding, but the percentage of labor hours is the same. Let's review this benchmark rule for housing community development recipients. When the housing and community development funds are invested in a project and have a combined total of $200,000 or more, this triggers Section 3. This means that the total number of labor hours must be collected as well as the total number of Section 3 labor hours. To meet the Section 3 compliance, no less than 25% of the total labor hours must come from Section 3 businesses or Section 3 workers. Additionally, within the 25% of the labor hours from the Section 3 worker, 5% of those labor hours must be from a targeted Section 3 worker. So housing and community development projects where Section 3 applies includes housing rehabilitation, housing construction, and other public construction projects assisted under HUD programs that provide housing and community development financial assistance, where the amount of assistance to the project exceeds the threshold of $200,000. So it's important to note this threshold will not apply to HUD's lead hazard control or healthy homes program. It has a different threshold, which we can talk about in greater detail in June. But back to the benchmark. This benchmark means that 25% of the total labor hours on a project is to be completed from Section 3 worker labor hours or Section 3 business concerns. So the total number of labor hours, including targeted Section 3 workers, is 25%. Please don't get that confused with combining those two percentages. It's not 30%, it's only 25%. So applicable HUD-funded projects are required to meet the benchmark for Section 3 workers or targeted Section 3 workers. Also, it's important to note there is a different definition of targeted Section 3 workers between a housing community development recipient and a public housing authority. So let's take a look at the public housing authority benchmarks. As I stated, the new rule included this information in the benchmark Federal Register notice. So if you'd like to take a look at that, definitely I would encourage you to do that. But in short, this establishes a new focus towards labor hours and a creation of targeted Section 3 workers. This specific benchmark applies to public housing financial assistance. And similarly, the benchmark means the total of a 25% of the labor hours on a project must be from Section 3 workers or Section 3 business concerns when public housing financial assistance is invested. So Section 3 compliance is triggered for basically any type of public housing funding. It's important to note that mixed financing development projects will include Section 3 compliance even if $1 of public housing financial assistance is applied to the project that meets the definition that's further described in the C.F.R. And of course, we can go through that in more detail if you'd like. So let's start with just the basics here as well. When public housing financial assistance is invested in a project, this triggers Section 3. This means that the total number of labor hours must be collected, as well as the total number of Section 3 labor hours. To meet the Section 3 compliance, no less than 25% of the total labor hours, again, must come from Section 3 businesses or Section 3 workers. And again, additionally, within the 25% of the total labor hours from Section 3 workers, 5% of those labor hours must be from a targeted Section 3 worker. For public housing assistance that is provided by small PHAs, these benchmarks and how they're being met can be documented through qualitative efforts. If small PHAs or those under 250 units can document labor hours, definitely we are encouraging you to do so. But if you cannot document labor hours as a small PHA, then you're only required to document their Section 3 efforts through qualitative efforts, such as a job fair. Program offices will be responsible for compliance of monitoring with these benchmarks. And we'll talk a little bit more about those qualitative efforts in just a minute. So that was a lot of information. So let's take a moment to see if there's any questions, especially on the benchmarks. We will talk a little bit more about the qualitative efforts, but it's a good time to get a break and get us back together to see if there's anything out there. So Jeff, is there anything in the queue for questions related to benchmarks or anything we've covered thus far?
Jen, no questions at the moment, but while we're giving folks a moment to finish their thought, if they are typing, would also welcome folks to feel free to come off mute if that's easier as well.
Definitely.
And it is a lot. I remember the first time I looked at that, I was like, oh man, my eyes got a little wide. So don't feel shy or concerned if it's going to take more than one look. And as Jen mentioned, we've got those upcoming trainings in June that'll be do a deeper dive by grantee type and partner type as well.
Yeah,
and Jen, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say it does also take somewhat of a calculator when you have a kind of middle school math denominator and numerator, but definitely we can help you through that.
And Jen, I haven't seen any questions yet, so maybe we can keep moving, but just keep the invitation open for folks to feel free to put any in the chat, and we'll either weave them in as we go, or we've got some more time later on to answer those as well.
Definitely. Thanks, Jeff. So the benchmark notice also considered how to meet Section 3 if your project falls short of those benchmarks and labor hours needed to meet the 25%. So recipients will be considered to have complied with the Section 3 requirements and meet the safe harbor or benchmark if they certify that they have followed the required prioritization of effort and meet or exceeded the applicable Section 3 benchmarks. So this prioritization applies to employment and training as well as contracting, and does also apply to the recipient and their contractors or subcontractors. This means that a recipient must make their best efforts to meet the safe harbor, so a plan and approach is a good and encouraged first step to developing a Section 3 plan that identifies how requirements will be implemented, identifying the benchmarks, how measures will be tracked, and how information will be reported. As a reminder, the rule was modified to follow industry practices of tracking hours. So you might use some things that are already in place to help with that. Again, a small PHA does not need to meet the labor hours if the agency does not elect to report on labor hours. However, it's required to report solely on qualitative efforts. Please also remember to include Section 3 language in your contracts and subcontracts to be sure that you're working towards the benchmarks at the onset of your project. So let's take a little look at qualitative efforts.
Excellent. And as you'll see in front of you, there's a pretty robust list of examples of activities to include or consider including in your qualitative reporting. And there are lots of qualitative activities that can assist you in promoting Section 3 and economic opportunities in your area. Certainly every community is unique in terms of the opportunities that are there, the relationships, the partnerships. And these outreach efforts are really encouraged to be developed as part of your Section 3 implementation plan. You may also want to consider connecting with other community partners that also have a vested interest in promoting economic self-sufficiency in your community. And you can conduct multiple activities to more comprehensively carry out the intent of the Section 3 rule to provide employment, training, and contracting opportunities to residents, workers, and businesses in your area. Lastly, as you develop an implementation plan for Section 3, it may be helpful to know a recipient can hold qualitative activities even if they meet the quantitative benchmarks, carrying out and really meeting that piece that Jen shared about the intent of the maximum extent feasible to provide employment and contracting opportunities in your community. This may also be a wise idea as really the calculation for if your organization meets the quantitative benchmark is determined at the very end of the project, when all the labor hours are counted and compared against the number of Section 3 hours. So you don't necessarily want to be caught off guard of, oh shoot, I thought we were going to hit it, but we fell a little bit short. And while small PHAs may elect to not report on labor hours, it is important to understand the labor hours and benchmarks associated and labor and benchmarks associated. Again, small PHAs are encouraged to comply with the benchmarks as it more fully carries out the intent of the law to provide economic opportunities to residents, local businesses, and those that could benefit from the law. And next slide, please. All right, as we discussed, the intention behind the passage of Section 3 is to keep HUD dollars local. When HUD dollars are spent on community projects or improvements, the work generated by the investment should be maximized by having employment opportunities generated by such projects be offered to persons living in publicly subsidized housing and in the community. While we just reviewed the Section 3 regulations in some detail, it's important to remember the main purpose. The most important impact is the beneficiaries of the economic opportunities that this provision of law creates. Section 3 really embodies what we collectively can achieve together, providing quality, affordable housing, improved infrastructure, and enhanced economic development through projects that provide benefit to low and very low income individuals. This last part that we'll transition to today is about the beneficiaries of Section 3 and Section 3 businesses themselves and opportunities there. There are two platforms that we're going to discuss that support Section 3 workers and Section 3 businesses, and those platforms are the Opportunity Portal and the Business Registry. We'll discuss them in a little bit. Before we do, maybe now's a good time for our final knowledge check. Jen, if you want to move us to the next slide. And I'll copy and paste this link for this final knowledge check here. And that was a lot of information that we just went over, and we really want you to feel comfortable and confident in your understanding. And also know that you don't have to be an expert walking away from today's conversation, and that we really do have those deep dive presentations next month. All right, maybe we'll give folks, while you're switching over, Jen, we'll give folks a couple more seconds to either use the QR code. I saw Jackie use the iPhone app that was built into the camera, or click the link and we can see what responses are coming in.
All right, Jeff, I've just resumed changed the screen, and I see that there's some responses coming in. Thanks everybody again for participating in our final poll today. So our first question is where is the Section 3 law found? And that is correct for those that answered. 24 CFR Part 75. There was a couple of trick questions there. So don't get those flipped around like the question did. 24 CFR Part 75 is where you can find all of the Section 3 answers. How is Section 3 worker defined? That's exactly right, all of the above. A youth build participant employed by a Section 3 business or a low or very low income individual. Fabulous. We've got a fantastic group. And the final question, what is the benchmark percentage of Section 3 labor hours on a project? And of all the questions, everybody got 25%, which is exactly correct. So thanks, everybody. I appreciate you paying attention and listening. I hope you all use and put that information to good work through the Section 3 rule. All right, so off we go. The Opportunity Portal is the first platform that we'll talk about. It helps match workers to jobs and training opportunities and businesses to contracting opportunities. So users may search jobs, contracts, and businesses by keyword or location, like a city, state, or county. A sign-in is not required to search. And for instance, an individual can share their resume or certifications so that the Section 3 business can find qualified individuals. So please note that this portal only connects a business to a Section 3 worker. Other functions or steps in a hiring process are conducted outside of this system. Additionally, within the Opportunity Portal, contract opportunities can be found to help Section 3 businesses locate HUD-funded projects or contracts for employment. So again, the procurement process for a business is completed outside of this program. However, if a recipient or grantee posts the contracting opportunities on the Opportunity Portal, it provides businesses and Section 3 workers to get connected with that recipient and also get connected through the economic opportunities that it gets created to hopefully increase the percentage to meet the benchmarks for the new rule. Jeff, do you want to go over the business registry?
Love to, thank you. So the business registry really allows Section 3 business concerns to register and self-certify as qualifying under Section 3. And for grantees or recipients, the system allows you to search the registry for businesses for potential employment on a particular project that you're searching for. Now, remember, Section 3 business concerns are businesses that meet at least one of the following criteria documented in the last 6-month period. Either one, at least 51% owned and controlled by a low or very low income persons. 2, over 75% of the labor hours are performed by the business over the prior 3-month period are performed by Section 3 workers. Or 3, a business is at least 51% owned and controlled by current public housing residents or residents who currently live in Section 8 assisted housing. Now, this is great information to share with contractors and businesses that you typically work with, may already work with. An important thing to note, and so I'm going to repeat it again, this is an important tool that you can share with businesses and contractors that you typically or already work with. So feel free to put it in your newsletter or get it out in other ways. Next slide, please. So for the business, it's just a little snapshot for your awareness in terms of what the process is like to register a business in the business registry. And it's quite simple with a few basic questions about the business. You know, as you've already surmised, or as we've through this, the business really the benefits of registering are to potentially receive some preference for certain contracts or projects that are funded with HUD dollars. And of course, for recipients of HUD dollars subject to Section 3, it can be a great place to find businesses that may help you meet your Section 3 requirements. It's important to note that the business registry is not a procurement or hiring website, but more accurately, it's a platform to connect Section 3 businesses and recipients or grantees. Once a business has been selected through your bidding or procurement process, the recipient must then verify their Section 3 status. Remember, as we said, when a business registers on the Section 3 or on the business registry, they're self-certifying. So you're going to want to go in and verify their Section 3 status. Lastly, it's important for businesses to know that they must recertify every 3 years. And again, just really encourage you to share this far and wide with businesses you already work with, perhaps friends, family, clients that you think may be interested, because it can really be a great tool to potentially get them connected to additional business and contracts. Next slide, please.
So Jeff, let's put it a little bit into action. So let's say that that City X receives HUD CDBG funds for constructing a new public housing project that is $500,000. At the same time, a qualified business goes into the Section 3 business registry and enters their information. And also a qualified skilled worker enters their resume into the opportunity portal. And then City X begins looking to procure a contractor to complete their newly identified housing project. City X then posts the project they're working on and wanting to find a contractor for in the opportunity portal. Or maybe City X reaches out to a Section 3 business who is registered in the Section 3 business registry to notify them of that contracting opportunity. When this contracting opportunity is then posted in the opportunity portal, this gives both the Section 3 business an opportunity to be connected with the recipient and hired on the job, and also to hire Section 3 workers. It also gives the Section 3 worker the opportunity to reach out to those that might be being procured by the project as a Section 3 business. Then a Section 3 worker can use the portal to search employment and acquire employment at the project that City X is completing. So Section 3 in action really is through a great resource of our opportunity portal and our business registry. So we're happy to have shared Section 3 information with you. And there's a little bit more to share, which is an ask of us from us to you. So the recipients of HUD funds are encouraged to use the Section 3 opportunity portal. The more that there are contracting opportunities posted in the opportunity portal, the more businesses and residents will be able to readily access and communicate with the recipients, become aware of projects that are HUD funded. Additionally, our recipients will be able to find businesses that register in the business registry, which will help with the reporting and compliance of Section 3 benchmark labor hours. So share what you know and let your partners, businesses, residents, workers, and organizations in your communities that support economic opportunities know about the opportunity portal and Section 3 business registry, and encourage them to also attend the June training. So let's take a moment to see what's on the horizon for training. There are some June trainings that Jeff is sharing a link to, but I'll also get to a flyer here that you can see. It's got a lot of information on it. Please note that you're highly encouraged to invite your partners, businesses that you work with, or residents to these presentations. As you can see, there's a specific time for them to join on each of the days that are focused on large PHAs, small PHAs, and HCD recipients. FPM headquarters is also working on tools and resources, more trainings to come to better assist recipients with the successful application and implementation of Section 3. And recently, if you haven't seen, there are Section 3 FAQs that were released, and I encourage you to review them, as well as the HUD Exchange, which has a great Section 3 portal and training that has just been released. And I believe, Jeff, you're going to be sharing those in our chat as well, some great links to get to all those resources. Well, we want to thank you for your time today and appreciate you participating in this training and also in the questions that we asked. And while, again, this was an abbreviated presentation, I hope that you were able to take away some good nuggets of information. And we're happy to spend more time with you on Section 3 in early June. But please do use these slides as a reference. And also, if there's any inquiries, you can send any information or questions to Section 3 at HUD.gov. You can reach out to me directly at jennifer.h.olson@hud.gov. And if there's any questions about reporting, you can also feel free to reach out to 60,002 questions at HUD.gov. For both of those, please definitely feel welcome to copy me on that so that we're providing a coordinated response to you from HUD. And we do appreciate all those questions coming in. So
Sure.
last, I think we'll kind of end our little to see if anybody has any questions. And Jeff, if you have, if you've seen anything in the chat, or if anybody'd like to unmute.
Absolutely. And while folks are preparing to unmute themselves and do that, maybe I'll offer one to you that I think is a great question. And this is from Tam. Do grantees need to post the project in the opportunity portal, or is it optional?
Good question, Tam. And you've got a lot of contractors down in Billings. So my first thing is to say the answer to your question is no, it is not required to use the opportunity portal. And it also is not required to use the business registry, but we definitely are encouraging you to do so to help get those contractors kind of connected to finding Section 3 business workers or businesses or workers and recipients the opportunity to kind of find those businesses that would be qualified as Section 3. And remember, Section 3 is unique and not based on any other criteria, such as minority race or ethnicity or gender. That's why Section 3 comes in with an income look at a business or a worker. So definitely encourage you to use them, but no, you're not required. Good question.
Very good question. And we also had requests for links to the business registry and opportunity portal. I went ahead and popped those directly into the chat so that folks could access those directly. And then of course, Jen, as you said, also shared the link to the flyer for the June trainings, which also through that would be how folks could register for those as well. And let's see. I don't see any other questions as we're winding down to our last couple of minutes. And so, oh, one more. From Tam chiming in, already combing into the registry, noting that Billings currently only has one Section 3 contractor in the registry, and there's some work to do in opportunity there, which is great. I'm excited about these tools because I think really they just, going back to the intention of Section 3, they just offer such an opportunity to meet the intention of Section 3, which is really to leverage those dollars to amplify the impact in the communities. And I think, especially as we build it out, I think it'll reach a tipping point where, you know, they could be the clearinghouse where folks are going, and residents or folks that qualify are getting those job opportunities. And so I'm excited about it.
Yeah, and I think, you know, to that end, Jeff, as those opportunities are posted, it really does help those individuals that might be moving in or out of your area that would be qualified Section 3 workers, and giving them an opportunity to get connected with what's happening in your community. So yeah, I definitely would say, you know, starting somewhere and starting to enter some of those projects in the business registry and opportunity, or in the opportunity portal and businesses in the business registry, is to your advantage. The other thing to note is that the opportunity portal doesn't keep them on there forever. So it's definitely a good system that you can add in, and it will, you know, kind of delete any old information. So you won't be maybe struggling by trying to get responses to somebody who had for an old project. It definitely is kept up to date, and that's really, I think, a really great advantage. So,
and
well,
Jen, I'm wondering too, with the business registry and opportunity portal, if utilizing those as those are built out would also contribute to the qualitative reporting for folks as well. Is that accurate?
It doesn't link, but what it does do is help you to identify who those businesses are and workers, so you can do the reporting. But I think at a time, if there's any other questions, definitely you can throw them to me or Jeff, or throw them in the chat. We'll get back to you. And also one last plug for the June trainings. You'll have some one-on-one time as well to ask great questions. But I really just want to thank not only the Montana Housing Partnership Conference for allowing us to do this presentation today, but also all of you attendees that were able to join today and listen into this very important and cool part of the Section 3, or part of the law that helps do a little double benefit to those people that we're trying to serve.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jennifer and Jeff. I definitely appreciated it, and I'm sure the group did as well. For the participants, I know with your guys' packet, you guys should have received like a whiteboard paddle or marker in the mail. If you guys found something inspiring or exciting with their presentation, if you want to go ahead and turn your camera on and write it on that whiteboard or just on a white piece of paper and hold it up for the group, that might be something fun. And we can get a picture of everybody with that. So if you guys want to go ahead and participate in that, go ahead and turn your camera on and hold it up, and you can just write one word, an adjective of something new, exciting, inspiring that you learned from their session today. And then if you don't mind turning your camera on, and we can share it with the group.
Of silver was used just in industry. I hear that there's basically a shortage of silver now.
Yay! Great info. Awesome, Lori.
Thank you,
Did anyone
Lori.
else want to share?
When you're talking this much money, there's too much temptation to put a bar of steel or something in the center.
Perfect. Awesome. Encouraged. Business registry. Awesome. That's great. Yay. Anybody else? I know we're getting close to our time. So thank you all for joining us. Oh, awesome. June training is coming. Yes. So thank you all for joining us for this session. Remember, you guys can always participate in the community conversations through the HUD app, chat or more. We're now going to go on a 1-hour lunch break, but we look forward to having you guys back for the breakout session starting at 1 p.m. Thank you all so much for attending, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye all. Thanks again.